Welcome to my World History Notes, where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. We're in World War II right now. This is the end of my book for a reason. We'll continue with history studies after the book is done, but I just want to continue finishing up this chapter, and a very important time in world history. And I just hope you'll follow along. You can purchase my book on lulu.com, amazon.com, or at the Bible Baptist bookstore. And if you're following me here, please subscribe to my channel. Now, in the Soviet Union, by January and February 1943, all German forces in southern Russia were in great jeopardy. General Paulus's Sixth Army died before Stalingrad as Hitler's stubborn intrusion into battlefield tactics had cost him 300,000 men. Paulus and 93,000 surrendered. The Soviets drove hard into the German forces while partisans engaged in guerrilla warfare on the German rear lines. German General Manstein skillfully counterattacked and drove the Soviets back, recapturing the city of Kharkov on March 14th. The communists, though, now 4 times as strong as the Germans, with all of the aid the FDR was sending them, met Manstein at the Battle of Kursk from July 5th to 16th in history's greatest contest of armor. 2,700 German tanks met 3,600 Soviet tanks. 800,000 German infantry faced 1,300,000 Soviet infantry. In the end, Soviets won a decisive victory, killing, wounding, or capturing 500,000 Germans and destroying 900 tanks and 200 aircraft. The Germans had called it Operation Citadel. The Soviets lost 600,000 killed, wounded, and captured. 1,500 tanks, and 1,000 aircraft. From July to November 1943, the Soviets drove the Germans backward in spite of Hitler's orders to hold in the east, even to the death. The Allied invasion of Western Europe began with D-Day, June 6, 1944, as Operation Overlord, with British and American forces hitting the beaches at Normandy. Within a month, Allied strength ashore had built to 1 million men and 150,000 vehicles. In July, the breakout from the beachhead and Patton's Third Army exploits as they drove to Germany are legendary. In August, southern France was invaded. By September of 1944, the Allies were closing in on the German border. Then Montgomery had a plan to drop 3 airborne divisions behind the German lines, seizing the bridges of 3 rivers. This was called Operation Market Garden, and at the subsequent Battle of Arnhem was a disaster for the Allies, as the British 1st Airborne made a gallantly brave but futile stand against the Germans. 7,000 men were left behind, killed, captured, or wounded. Then, as the Allied advance reached into December, the Germans counterattacked in the Ardennes offensive in what was called the Battle of the Bulge. In a last-ditch attempt to break the Allied offensive, the 18,000-strong 101st Airborne was trapped in Bastogne. Once again, Hitler's inept attempt at generalship secured the defeat for the German army as British and American troops trashed the Fuhrer's gamble. Captured Americans were murdered, gunned down at Malmedy by SS troops. During this time, the V-bomb threat severely shook English morale as those primitive missiles rained on London in spite of the fact that half of them were shot down by the RAF. Then on July 20th, 1944, a German army plan to overthrow the Nazi regime failed as Hitler survived a bomb explosion at his headquarters. After a ruthless purge of army officers, Hitler assumed his incompetent control over all military operations. Rommel, a key figure in the plot, was forced to commit suicide. The Soviets began sweeping through Eastern Europe and the Balkans as Stalin not only wanted to defeat Germany conclusively, but to gobble up as much territory for the Soviets' purpose in Eastern Europe as possible. As Germany neared collapse, the Octagon Conference, also known as the Second Quebec Conference, took place, at which principal attention was given to the war against Japan. Germany's collapse occurred as Russia approached from the east and the Allies from the west. Allied forces argued over who would control what, as American and French forces argued over Stuttgart. Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on April 30th, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally to President Eisenhower, and the war in the West officially ended at midnight on May 8, 1945. It was claimed that Eisenhower had slowed down the American advance by prior agreement so that the Soviet Union could enter Berlin first. After the war, General Patton wanted to continue the fight with Communist Soviets, but the U.S. wanted no more war. FDR had died on April 12, 1945, and was almost immediately cremated. Some conservatives implied that something more than just his natural death from an ever-weakening body ravaged by polio had occurred. Curtis Stahl, his son-in-law, seems to imply that FDR may have been murdered as a new world dominated by socialism or communism was being prepared. Still others insist that President Roosevelt, whose negotiations consigned half the world to the living death of communism, died of a brain tumor and was quite mad during the final months of the war. With Hitler's degenerating mind, that would make two madmen facing each other with a third, Stalin, waiting to pounce on the victor. So we don't know if that's true. He may have just been a natural death. So let's, make sure you understand that. But just talking about things that were being spoken of at that time. So we're going to stop here, and we just have a couple more sessions to go before we get to the conclusion of World War II, this era. Excuse me, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do next. But I thank you I hope you'll study this. And Battle of Kursk is really fascinating if you're into military stuff, armor and stuff like that, tanks and things. So thank you, and hope you come to your own conclusions and study world history on your own.